So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got about 36 clips on a bunch of topics for what I think should be a really good show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with a little political comedy and along with my commentary between the clips. As always, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the regular Big Five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, and I'll also have a few of those quasi-news political comedy clips from Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, the last show from Bill Maher before he takes his 5-week summer break till September 12th. I'll be covering several different topics this week, which I've listed down in the video description rather than listing them all for you verbally now. But the first topic I want to cover is this breaking news about the Ebola virus. It's spreading out of control in Africa, and a doctor who was doing medical missionary work in Africa from the United States contracted the disease and came back to the United States. And before I get to the more serious clips, I want to show a little bit of Bill Maher's coverage of the Ebola virus in his monologue last Friday night, when he made the point that you can see that turns out to be somewhat accurate, as I'll describe after I show you the clip here.
No, not that, come on, we don't have reason to be concerned. We do. I mean, Doctors Without Borders say it is out of control in West Africa, and Americans want to know two things. One, are Bono and George Clooney safe? And two, will this be affecting any countries with white people? Right.
I think that may have qualified almost as the booing into applause that Bill Maher sometimes gets. And that's kind of a sad commentary on what the American public likes in their news. But if you watch the coverage of the Ebola virus, the Ebola epidemic on the Sunday morning news shows, a lot of it kind of fit Bill Maher's model there. And first I want to show this report from Nancy Snyderman, a physician who is over on NBC's Meet the Press this morning, and she talked about why we in the United States shouldn't have to worry too much about Ebola, even though it's a threat in Africa, kind of fulfilling Bill Maher's prophecy there from Friday night's Real Time, and I'll talk about that a little more after you watch Dr. Nancy Snyderman here.
Disease continues to ravage parts of West Africa. The death toll now over 700 and climbing. Chances of an Ebola outbreak in the United States are slim, but the government says it's ready.
Here are the three main reasons why.
Number one, government on alert. Only the CDC can confirm Ebola cases in the United States, and they have 20 quarantine stations at all major points of entry to the country, staffed with medical and public health officers. If a traveler is sick on a flight, that person would be flagged by the flight crew, isolated, and passengers and crew may be detained to get medical attention upon landing. If necessary, those with the disease can be denied entry into the United States. Number two, our modern healthcare system. A person can't get Ebola without direct contact with bodily fluids of someone who already has the disease. Basic hygiene at our emergency rooms should prevent the virus from spreading. Number three, command and control. Hospitals in West Africa have almost become amplification centers for the disease, meaning unmodern facilities and lack of medical supplies can increase rather than halt the disease's spread. In the United States, the government says there are strong systems in place to find people who are sick, isolate them, and give treatment. Having a command and control center gives experts a place to centralize decision-making and take quick action.
So you can see the NBC report there from Meet the Press was almost entirely about why it is that we in the United States shouldn't really have to worry too much about the Ebola virus. So the first point about the government is on guard, and the last point about how the CDC has, all these procedures in place, that got questioned on several different shows. And I think the head of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, was over on just about all the shows, and I'm not going to show clips of him from all the shows, but I want to show there was one difference in the Ebola coverage on Fox News compared to the other programs. There are actually two major differences. One is, I'm going to show this report from from Fox News. The reporter's name is Jonathan Seri, and he is the only reporter, the only news program that mentioned that the doctor who got Ebola actually was a Christian missionary. And at the end he talks about wanting to pray, or how the doctor's wife is asking people to pray for him and for all the Ebola victims. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip over here.
Brantley is the first of 2 American Ebola patients to arrive in Atlanta aboard this air ambulance chartered by the Christian International Relief charity Samaritan's Purse. He and nurse Nancy Wrightball are medical missionaries working with the organization to treat Ebola patients in Liberia, where the disease is rampant. The relief organization says Wrightball is expected to travel to Atlanta in a few days. Many organizations, including the Peace Corps, are pulling their people from West Africa. Peace Corps officials say they're committed to their work in the region and hope to return soon. This week, President Obama will host a summit of African leaders. At least 2 have backed out to address Ebola crises back home. The administration says there's no need for concern in the U.S., as travelers from Africa will be screened prior to departure and on arrival. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, located next to Emory University, has helped develop many of the protocols involved with transporting and treating Dr. Brantley, including the biological containment unit used on board the plane. And Dr. Brantley got to speak with his wife, who says her husband's glad to be back in the U.S. Amber Brantley released a written statement to reporters asking people to continue praying not only for her husband, but also for Nurse Wrightball, the people of Liberia, and the people who continue to serve them in that part of the world. Chris?
So yeah, that's the Fox News report from their reporter Jonathan Seri, and it's the only show on the Sunday morning shows. They all covered Ebola, but that's the only show that mentioned that these were Christian medical missionaries and they were working for a Christian group. And I actually don't see that as bias. I think that's a relevant fact that should have been reported on the other shows. But one thing I noticed they didn't report on Fox News in their Ebola coverage was how Ebola is spread, that it can only be spread by direct physical contact with the person and, especially their bodily fluids. It can't be spread through the air. And that might have stopped a lot of the fear that was in all of the broadcasts about Ebola. It seemed some of the fear was a little bit too great. And one of the people who was kind of a fearmonger on the Ebola issue was former Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. And he wasn't on any of the shows, but I want to show over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. The host, George Stephanopoulos, asked the head of the CDC, this Dr. Tom Frieden, to respond to a tweet from Donald Trump, kind of the fear-mongering that I was talking about. And you can see he has a very responsible, calm answer over in this clip.
Frieden, as you know, a lot of anxiety here in the United States about the spread of Ebola, whether we're taking an unnecessary risk. I want to show a tweet that Donald Trump put out just the other day. He said that the U.S. must immediately stop all flights from Ebola-infected countries or the plague will start and spread inside our borders. Act fast. How do you respond to that?
Well, Ebola is scary, and it's understandable that with a deadly disease, people are concerned. But the plain truth is that we can stop Ebola. We know how to control it. Hospital infection control and stopping it at the source in Africa. We're not going to hermetically seal the borders of the U.S. We're reliant and interdependent with the world for travel, for trade, for economy, for our families and communities. But really, the single most important thing we can do to protect Americans is to stop this disease at the source in Africa.
But Dr. Frieden.
So at least that's an important point why we need to care about Africa before it gets to, what was it Bill Maher said, countries where there are white people. The head of the CDC saying there that one of the most important things we can do is stop the spread there. And I don't want to say that the fear tactics were, or not the fear tactics, but the fear about Ebola was on one program or another, because there was kind of a lot of fear about Ebola, maybe, like I said, a little bit too much. And I want to show over, this is David Gregory on Meet the Press, also had the head of the CDC, Tom Frieden, on, and asked why it was we actually let this doctor, this American doctor who had been working in Africa on Ebola and contracted the disease, why we let him back in the United States. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip right here.
And he was working in Western Africa in Liberia. When you look at some of the precautions that are taken, a specially outfitted plane for him to be contained, the medical units on site from the airport to his transport to Emory, and then in a containment unit at Emory, is this an unacceptable risk to bring somebody with Ebola back?
Well, first off, we have to say that he was coming home, and the organization that sent him to Africa made the decision to bring him home. He's an American citizen, and what our role is in public health is to make sure that if an American is coming home with an infectious disease, we protect others so that they don't spread it. And that's what we did in transit and when he's here.
So, I don't know. I generally think that that person shouldn't have been excluded from the United States just because they have Ebola, if they can take these precautions, and they know how Ebola spreads, like I said, from direct contact with a person or the person's bodily fluids. So, I don't know, you can tell me what you think in the comments section. I want to show one more clip on the Ebola story. This is Nora O'Donnell over on CBS's Face the Nation, but I think there were several different hosts asked the Dr. Tom Frieden, the head of the CDC, whether we can really trust the CDC to handle this Ebola problem after some problems with the competence of the Centers for Disease Control handling dangerous substances have come to light in the last year. And I'll show you the answer from the head of the CDC. This is on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
In charge of making sure that Ebola does not spread here in the U.S. And yet just this year, we've heard examples of the CDC mishandling anthrax, smallpox, avian flu samples. Are you absolutely confident that the CDC will make sure this virus is handled properly and will not be spread?
There were lapses in our laboratory. Fortunately, we identified them and reported them before anyone got harmed and before there was any release of anything into the community. But that really shows the importance of being meticulous with infection control. We're doing that in our labs now. We're working around the clock to make them among the safest in the world. They're already among the best in the world. But it really shows that for healthcare workers taking care of people with Ebola or other infectious diseases, it's important to be completely meticulous with infection control. Ebola is not one of the most infectious diseases, but because it's so deadly, the stakes are so high that healthcare workers need to have a healthy fear of what could happen and turn that fear into action to make sure they take scrupulous action, that every single infection control precaution that we recommend is followed.
So I guess that's a reasonable answer, but it is a little bit disconcerting that the CDC's had all these problems over the last year handling very dangerous substances, and even though no one's actually died, now they're handling this Ebola outbreak. But like I said, I think the fear about Ebola in the United States is a little bit overblown, so I'm not one of those people who is too concerned about that answer. Anyway, those are the clips on the breaking Ebola story I want to show you this morning. And next story I want to get to is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in Gaza, which has been a big story for several weeks now. Ukraine has kind of dropped off. It wasn't really covered on any of the Sunday shows this morning, but Gaza is still a continuing story. And even though a lot of what's happening is just more of the same, more dead civilians, more Israeli troops in Gaza, though they say there may actually be a new phase where Israel's pulling out of, to like the border and getting some of its troops out. But I want to show this one clip from the CNN reporter from State of the Union. His name is John Voss. And he explained this new phase. It kind of reminded me of that that Who lyric. What is it? Say hello to the new boss, same as the old boss. That's kind of how he described the new phase in the Gaza conflict over on CNN State of the Union this morning in this clip.
Is in Gaza. John, the Israelis say they're entering what's called a new phase of the operation. What does that mean and look like for the Palestinians?
Well, right now, Candy, this new phase tends to look a lot like the old phase. Here in Gaza City, there's been constant artillery and tank fire over the last couple of hours. But what we have seen that is different, the Israeli troops pulling back, especially from the northern part of the Gaza Strip, redeploying closer to the border, some even leaving the Gaza Strip altogether. That is because the Israelis have now wrapped up, or are about to wrap up, that ground operation, which was intended to destroy that network of tunnels which Hamas had built beneath Gaza. But as you mentioned, intensive military operations by the Israelis underway in the southern part of Rafah, particularly around that border town of Rafah. As you say, 71 people there killed today. That's according to Palestinian sources. And Candy, this is the third day that the Israelis have hit the southern part of Gaza hard. 100 people died there at least on Friday when that ceasefire unraveled. More than 100 died there on Saturday. And now we have another high death toll in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. One last mention here too from Gaza City. If the Palestinians did not know that the Israelis were continuing with this offensive, the Israelis certainly made sure they did. Leaflets were dropped from the sky, written in Arabic, saying, "Tell your leaders who are deep underground, this battle will continue." Candy?
That last part from John Voss there about the leaflets I thought was interesting. The psychological warfare from Israel trying to separate the Palestinian people from the leadership, especially the Hamas leadership. You may remember a clip, I think, from 2 weeks back where I had Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, talking about how the leaders of Hamas are all either in these secure underground bunkers or they're over in Qatar, like the Khalid Mashal, who I showed a couple clips from last week. And one breaking story that was on a couple of the different programs this morning about what's going on in Gaza is there was another UN school that was apparently hit by Israeli airstrikes, although as who's actually responsible, I guess that is still not completely clear. But first I'm going to show, this is Clarissa Ward from CBS's Face the Nation talking about that breaking story in Gaza, the UN school that was hit. Over in this clip.
It's hard to imagine that there wouldn't be fallout. According to the UN, we spoke to one UN spokesperson who told us that at least 6 UN facilities have now been hit. And one interesting detail he told us is that they had given the Israeli military the coordinates of this school 33 times, Nora, most recently just 1 hour before that missile hit.
So that's the CBS reporter Clarissa Ward reporting on the UN school, and I've showed a previous on previous LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup. I showed someone from the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA. Hopefully I didn't get that backwards again, but I always seem to get it backwards. But they actually had the head of that agency was also over on Face the Nation. And talking to Bob Schiefwer's also talking to Nora O'Donnell, and he responded to this charge that UN schools were being hit because weapons were stored there, and he pretty much refuted it or denied it, or you can listen to his explanation from Face the Nation this morning talking to Nora O'Donnell over in this clip.
Well, as you mentioned, this is the second attack on a UN school in just the past week, and I believe the 6th attack on a UN facility since this conflict began. Are your facilities protecting members of Hamas?
Look, I think what you have to get a sense of is we have 250,000 people now sheltered in our schools as a result of the intensity of the conflict that is going on in Gaza. Some of these people have received instructions from the Israeli Defense Forces to leave areas that they were living in. Others fled the fighting. And because we have numerous school buildings throughout the Gaza Strip, we have been able to accommodate them in about 90 school buildings. And so this is very clear under international law that these are premises that are protected. the sanctity of which have to be respected by all parties. And so, of course, when they are shelled, it is something that is unacceptable in any sense. Now, we have also had incidents, and these were 3, where in the course of inspections that we carried out, we identified weapons caches that were in the premises, something that we made known to the world in a very proactive and transparent way, because those ways of endangering our premises by placing weapons in them are unacceptable, and we condemn them unreservedly. But clearly, nobody can suggest that because weapons are found in one premise, this can be in any sense a justification for shelling other schools and endangering the lives of displaced people in the middle of a war zone.
So that seems like a reasonable refutation of the justification for shelling those UN schools, and I don't know why Israel is, I'm only hoping that it's an error and they're not actually targeting UN schools. That would just not only be awful, but it would be stupid. So I don't know, you can tell me what you make of that. I also want to show a couple clips of David Gregory on NBC's Meet the Press interviewing I guess he would be the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations if if Palestine was a state, member state of the United Nations, but they're actually just an observer. So this guy is the Palestinian observer to the United Nations. His name is Riyad Mansour, and David Gregory asked him 3 different times, since he's not from the Hamas wing of the Palestinians, he's from the Fatah West Bank PLO wing of the Palestinians. David Gregory tried to get him to condemn Hamas 3 different times, and I actually thought I had captured all 3 clips, but I have 2 of them. So here is I think it's like the first and third time that David Gregory tries to get him to condemn Hamas for drawing the Israeli ire upon the Palestinian people in Gaza, and using people as human shields. Well, you'll see, and I'll talk about it a little more after you watch the first clip here.
Waiting for the Israeli side to come to Cairo to begin the negotiation.
Fair enough. And indeed, the reason I'm pressing this point is not to challenge you about how horrific the loss of civilians are. As a more moderate Palestinian political figure, which is what you are, representing the Palestinian Authority, which there's certainly no love lost between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. I'm wondering what level of culpability you believe that Hamas has for the advancement of the Palestinian people, not just in this conflict, but more generally.
I believe that if we allow for peace to take place, negotiation to take place, under the leadership of President Mahmoud Abbas, who is bringing all political elements in the Palestinian side, including Hamas under his wing in the national consensus government. If we empower this government, we will be able to move gradually from the situation of confrontation and fighting into the situation of lifting, this tragedy and blockade against our people in Gaza, giving the people there a hope. 50% of the population in Gaza are under 18. If you put them in a continuous situation of fighting and resentment and hate, this is an excellent atmosphere for radicalism. But if you give them hope, you open the borders, you let them go to schools, let them look for good jobs, let them look for moderation, then we will succeed in allowing all those who want to have peace between us and the Israelis to have the upper hand.
And I think a lot.
So that was actually, I believe, the second time that David Gregory tried to get Ambassador Riyad Mansour there to go against Hamas, since he's from the other wing of the Palestinians. And now I'm going to show you the third time, and how Riyad Mansour responded to David Gregory's third attempt to criticize Hamas over in this clip.
People listening, right, would find that compelling, the idea that the Palestinian Authority could provide better leadership perhaps in Gaza than Hamas. But I just want to try one more on this, which is, do you think that Hamas is helping or hurting Palestinians right now?
Hamas is part of the Palestinian political configuration. The question is how to deal with that. The first step is the national consensus government. Israel is trying to destroy this government. To destroy this government, it's pushing us back into divisions and allowing Hamas to have support in the Gaza Strip. The alternative is empower the national consensus government, allow the government of President Mahmoud Abbas to show the people in the Gaza Strip that it succeeded in having peace, in stopping the fighting, in addressing the wounds of our people in Gaza, then in lifting the siege in Gaza, giving people hope. Let the 1.8 million people in Gaza see that this national consensus government is improving their lives, then that would be strengthening President Mahmoud Abbas and allowing us to have more strength in the Gaza Strip and giving our people an alternative instead of the continuation of fighting, an alternative of moving in the direction of peace. And of course, we have to put an end to the occupation so that the independent state of Palestine to become independent and to actualize the dream of two-state solution.
All right, Ambassador.
So that last part about the occupation, I think that was what was cut out of the first clip that I didn't end up showing when Ambassador Riyad Mansour there actually said that why he won't condemn Hamas is because it's actually the occupation that is the problem, and it's radicalized, and you have to expect people to become radicalized when Gaza is blockaded. And so those were two clips of David Gregory having his own sort of narrative that he was trying to get his guests to adopt, and that's kind of the same thing he did with Ron Dermer, the Israeli ambassador to, I think, to the United States, not to the United Nations, who basically gave the other side on Meet the Press. There's no Prime Minister Netanyahu this week. The last 2 weeks he was on almost all the shows. This week we just had Ron Dermer, and he was responding to David Gregory's sort of narrative that he wanted this guest to adopt, that Israel is winning the battle but losing the war, and that there isn't really a military solution to the problem of Hamas. And you can see David Gregory asked the Israeli ambassador about that in his response over here.
What is the solution here? You don't have a delegation that's going to Egypt to engage in talks.
What's the point?
Well, I'm asking
We've had 7
but is there
ceasefires.
really a military solution to this? I mean, if you look at Andrea Mitchell's piece in this larger question, which is well acquainted as I am, obviously, with Israel's arguments about its security, are you paying a price here that ultimately endangers Israel's security in the future, inflames not just international opinion against Israel, but certainly within Gaza and the Arab world, to a point where you're losing the larger war, even if you achieve some military objectives right now?
No, I don't think so. You have to fight terror. You can't embrace terrorists. That's unfortunately what President Abbas has done. Take the case of Iraq. Do you think the solution of Iraq is to have the Iraqi government just simply include ISIS as a member of the government? Because that's what the Palestinian government just did. They did it 2 months ago. We were very much opposed to it and very upset when the international community basically said, hey, this is a good thing for peace. It's a terrible thing for peace. The road to peace goes over Hamas. It doesn't include Hamas.
So is there a military solution to the Hamas problem?
Yes. And Israel right now is working very hard to degrade their capability.
Degrade? I mean, can you eliminate Hamas?
There's a cost for any action that you have. And
is Israel willing to pay it?
And unfortunately, Israel has many threats. This is not the only threat that Israel faces. We live in a very, very unstable region.
But what do you want?
So that's one of the clips of Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer, David Gregory trying to get him to admit that they have to find a non-military solution, and he basically follows up on that same issue in another question to Ambassador Ron Dermer, where he asks, how are you going to empower Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas over Hamas? And this kind of plays into what I was talking about last week, where that's sort of the hidden agenda behind the whole Israeli action, where they're trying to delegitimize Hamas and disempower Hamas. And I don't know if it's working or not, but I guess this is actually a good question from David Gregory to the Israeli ambassador, is like, how are these actions actually empowering the right people and disempowering the wrong people? And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip here.
Very unstable region.
But what do you want? If you want the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas to have a greater political say in what happens in Gaza, then how do you achieve that?
Do
you do it militarily?
Hamas is going to allow him to go in? Hamas was the ones who threw them out. The Palestinian official who sat here forgot to mention that in 2007 there was a coup in Gaza. Palestinian officials were thrown out of over the tops of buildings. They were shot, Palestinian Authority officials. Now, unfortunately, they're in alliance with this terror organization. I hope, and it's a genocidal terror organization. Hamas's charter calls for the murder of Jews worldwide. I hope that after this round of fighting is over, that President Abbas will abandon the pact that he's made with Hamas, and then he'll go back to peace negotiations.
Is the number of civilians...
So that's the response of the Israeli ambassador. They are trying to basically disempower Hamas and get Hamas out of the unity government. And that goes back to some clips I showed last April when Hamas first joined this unity Palestinian government. And that's very different from what you saw the ambassador from the Palestinians say there, that he's trying to keep a unified Palestinian people. And so that'll be beyond the horrific human toll of over 1,000, what is it up to now, like 1,300, 1,600 dead Palestinian civilians, and a couple dozen Israeli casualties, or dead Israelis, and then a bunch of Israelis injured as well. And but beyond all that, there's sort of this political fight as to whether this is a good tactical or strategic move on the part of the Israelis to get Hamas out of the picture in terms of Palestinian politics. And I don't know if it's actually achieved that or not, and that's kind of what we'll have to see in the end game to all this. Not that it's really a game, but that's just the terminology. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been looking at your comments as the clips have been playing, and I'm going to switch now to my next topic, which is sort of a two-part topic. It's on this Senate torture report that is supposedly going to be declassified in part and come out this week. I've talked about it on several previous shows last spring. One of the most interesting, well, not the most interesting thing, but it's been like 5 years that the Senate has been investigating whether the CIA tortured people back in the Bush years and the extent of it and what they were dishonest about. And I'll get to that issue in a minute, but the first issue is something that came up last spring where Senator Dianne Feinstein made this speech on the Senate floor, and then I also showed a couple clips of her on LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup last spring, where she went on the Sunday morning shows and talked about how the CIA had broken into Senate computers to apparently see what the Senate was investigating about the CIA, in this torture report. And at the time, the director of the CIA, John Brennan, totally dismissed it and said it was basically like irrational. And I'm actually going to show you a clip of what John Brennan said last spring. He was talking to NBC's Andrea Mitchell, but it was actually this forum on for the Council on Foreign Relations. And there's like a 1-hour video, and I put a link down in the video description to the whole 1-hour video that's on YouTube. But here's like a 1-minute clip where he responds to these allegations from Dianne Feinstein and says they're just ridiculous. Over here.
As far as the allegations of CIA hacking into Senate computers, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, we wouldn't do that. I mean, that's just beyond the scope of reason in terms of what we would do.
She says that there are potentially illegal and unconstitutional breaches by the CIA.
Well, there are appropriate authorities right now, both inside of CIA as well as outside of CIA,
Justice Department,
are looking at what CIA officers and as well as CISI staff members did. And I defer to them to determine whether or not there was any violation of law or principle. I referred the matter myself to the CIA Inspector General to make sure that he was able to look honestly and objectively at what CIA did there. And when the facts come out on this, I think a lot of people who are claiming that there has been this tremendous sort of spying and monitoring and hacking will be proved wrong.
So that's the guy, CIA Director John Brennan, who had to go and apologize to the Senate Intelligence Committee this week and say, oh, turned out we actually did break into these computers that the Senate staffers were using. Although, as I'll show some clips in a minute, it turns out the computers were actually CIA computers at the CIA, but these congressional staffers were using the computers to do their investigation. And then there's other mitigating facts, supposedly, like the CIA thought that some documents that the Senate shouldn't have were in those computers, so they were looking to make sure that documents that weren't supposed to be disclosed weren't disclosed. But I'll talk about that a little more, but I want to show a couple different people defending the CIA despite what came out this week. First, the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Saxby Chambliss, Republican Senator Saxby Chambliss, he definitely was on the side of the CIA, and he did everything he could to kind of say, oh, it doesn't really matter, and we shouldn't go, get all upset about it. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show that clip. This is, he was talking to Norah O'Donnell on CBS's Face the Nation this morning here.
He said beyond the scope of reason, he called you this past week and apologized. What did he say?
He did. You have to remember, I did not support John Brennan's nomination to be director of CIA, so if he has a critic, it's certainly me, although I think John has done a really good job as a director. John, when he found out about this breach or about the information that was received by certain Senate staffers on the Democratic side, he called Senator Feinstein and me, and he came to us and he sat down and said, here's what's happened. Well, the fact is, we now know he didn't have all the facts. Once he got all the facts, he came back and he did apologize. He was wrong. Senator Feinstein was right.
But when you hear the CIA is spying on Senate computers?
Yeah, well, these are their computers that were on their premises, but they were being dedicated to Senate staff. And I'm going to tell you, this is very, very serious. If I thought John Brennan knew about this, then it would be, certainly, we'd be calling for his resignation. But the OIG made a specific finding that he did not. But I will tell you, these 5 staffers that did this, if they worked for me, they'd be gone now. But the Accountability Board has been convened, and they will be looking into this, and they will be dealt with accordingly.
Senator.
So that's the Republican Senator Saxby Chambliss doing everything he can to defend what the CIA did, even though it's not really defensible. But I also want to show a Democrat. This is from the Obama administration. This is Dan Pfeiffer, senior advisor to President Obama. Since John Brennan works for President Obama, of course, he's going to try to defend what John Brennan did. And he was talking to George Stephanopoulos, I believe. Over on ABC, talking to George Stephanopoulos, and he also defended John Brennan. I wanted to play that whole 1-minute quote from John Brennan because somewhere in the middle he does say he's referring the matter to the Inspector General, which is the one good thing he did. Also, he wasn't talking to a committee of the Congress when he said that. He was talking to the Council on Foreign Relations, so he wasn't under oath. So it's not quite as bad as like the James Clapper thing on the NSA spying I've showed so many times on the show. But anyway, here's Dan Pfeiffer, senior advisor to the president, also defending John Brennan despite the revelations this week about spying on Senate use computers here.
He has full confidence in John Brennan, but we also saw just a few months ago John Brennan say he didn't know about this snooping, that nothing could be further from the truth. So either he wasn't telling the truth or he didn't know what was going on in his own agency. Doesn't that trouble the president?
Well, I think what we have to do is look at how Director Brennan responded to this. When there were allegations of improper conduct, he was the one who referred it to the Inspector General. And when the Inspector General came back with its report this week, he's setting up an accountability review board to ensure that the right steps are taken to provide accountability. And John Brennan is a man of great integrity and ability. He's someone the president knows very well, and the president has confidence in him.
The Senate report is likely to come out this week.
So, yeah, that's Dan Pfeiffer, senior advisor to the president, defending John Brennan, despite the clip I showed where he basically said, oh, it's ridiculous, and then it turned out to be true. And I'll show one more defense of John Brennan, this from Republican Mike Rogers. He's chair of the House Intelligence Committee, you know, Republican-controlled House. He's a Republican congressman, and he also defends John Brennan, but then also admits that there has to be some accountability for what happened. He was, let's see, Mike Rogers was talking to, over on CNN, talking to Candy Crowley about the snooping on Senate computers by the CIA over in this clip.
Remember, these weren't Senate computers. These were CIA computers at the CIA. And so I think that you have to take that into consideration when you're walking through.
Not kind of dancing on the head of a pin.
Well, no, in the sense that it's a bit complicated, but the story, when briefed by the IG, it makes you stop and pause and say, somebody needs to be held accountable. This is very serious, but I don't think this is some conspiracy notion that they wanted to spy on either of our committees. That would, of course, be intolerable. I think it would be a crime. This says that somebody overstepped their bounds by trying to figure out what the coding was on who had access to CIA computers and CIA spaces. That's a little bit different than spying on Congress, in my mind. Still serious breach. It's a very serious breach of trust. But I don't think this should be taken and extrapolated that every CIA officer out there is operating under this culture of lawlessness. Matter of fact, I argue that they go the extra mile. They're absolutely concerned about making sure they follow the law, especially when they're operating overseas and trying to do some really difficult work to keep America safe.
So there you have House Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, defending the head of the CIA, but also saying there needs to be accountability. I was reading the comments. I saw someone asked me to turn up the mic, so I've turned up the mic. I think I had it a little bit too low, somewhere in between some of those clips. I apologize for that. Having shown two different Republicans, Senator Saxby Chambliss and Congressman Mike Rogers, there, both defending John Brennan, and then also the Democrat, or the senior advisor to Democratic President Barack Obama, also defending John Brennan. I want to show an independent senator who caucuses with the Democrats, Angus King from Maine. He actually sounded a lot more skeptical about what John Brennan had done, and he was over on CBS's Face the Nation talking about the CIA snooping on Senate computers, or Senate used computers at the CIA, and first, here's his initial response.
Well, first of all, you're right that this has been an ongoing process for over 5 years.
I'm sorry, I'm playing the wrong clip there. Let me make sure I got the, I guess, got to mess up at least once here. Let's see, I should be playing, excuse me, this is CNN's State of the Union, Candy Crowley talking to Maine Independent Senator Angus King in this clip.
Thanks for being here. This whole thing started when your committee began to look at the Bush-era anti-terrorism plan of the CIA, looking at what happened there, looking at if torture was committed, did we send folks to other countries to have them tortured there, et cetera, et cetera. So the CIA, believing that you all had gotten a hold of documents you shouldn't have, hacks into the computer and essentially spies on your committee. And your reaction to that admission now?
Well, it's shocking, and it's particularly shocking because if you go back to the clips in the spring, Candy, you'll see John Brennan, the chief of the CIA, the director of the CIA, saying this was absurd and nobody should make these kind of irresponsible charges and all of those kinds of things. And now the CIA's own Inspector General has confirmed that they did just that they went into the computer system that was supposedly separated and within the control of the Senate committee and essentially fished around. They even created false identities to pretend to be Senate staff members going into the computers. It was, it's not good. I mean, the more important thing is the report itself, but this certainly undermines the kind of trust that you got to have. And here's the deal, Candy. When we do oversight of these agencies, which, by the way, nobody else really watches, we're the only one watching these guys, we've got to be able to rely upon what they tell us. If we can't trust
so is an apology
the information they're giving.
So yeah, that sorry for the mix-up at the beginning of the clip, but that was independent Senator Angus King from Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats, who's also on that Senate Intelligence Committee, and he is talking about how he's much more skeptical of, and even in the next clip I'm going to show from him, he specifically says he isn't even sure whether John Brennan didn't know, whether John Brennan was lying or not. All the other people I showed said that, well, or I showed Saxby Chambliss at the beginning saying, well, one thing I'm glad about is that John Brennan didn't know at the time, and the Inspector General found that, and I haven't read the report, so I don't know whether that's true or not, but here is Angus King talking to Candy Crowley on CNN State of the Union, and he's much more skeptical as to whether John Brennan knew he was saying something that wasn't true back in the spring when he said this was ridiculous, and I'll show you that clip here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think an apology is enough. I mean, and particularly because this had happened several times before. I think we've really got to have some serious discussions with John Brennan, find out what he knew about this when he was making those statements, and what he knew about it at the time. I'm not calling for his resignation, but I'm pretty skeptical right now because it really has undermined the trust between the committee. And if you go back to the report itself, Candy, one of the key findings of the report is they weren't honest with us. They weren't honest with the Congress. They weren't honest with the President, the Secretary of State. They were misrepresenting this program and what it did and how effective it was. And this is serious stuff, again, because we're the only people that are overseeing this outfit, and if we can't trust what they're telling us, we got to talk seriously about what our other options are.
So those are the clips I want to show on the first half of this torture story about the CIA spying on these computers that were being used by Senate staffers. But the real story, and what's going to be coming out this week, is hopefully coming out this week, is this report on CIA engaging in torture, and basically that it was worse than we knew up till now, that they inflated the effectiveness and minimized how bad the torture was, and that they were dishonest with the public and dishonest with the Congress, and that is going to be, hopefully it will disturb people when it comes out. But first I'm going to show that clip from Saxby Chambliss that I mistakenly started showing before. This is the first clip on the torture findings, where this is, of course, Republican vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he is very pro-CIA, and he does everything he can to say that what the majority of the report finds about torture not being effective and that they were dishonest and all that, that he tries to minimize that and say it's not even true. And I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip here.
Well, first of all, you're right that this has been an ongoing process for over 5 years now. There was only one vote against proceeding with this program, this investigation, when it was authorized in 2009. That was my vote. I thought it was a mistake then. I still think it's a mistake. There's a theory on the part of the Senate Democrats, who are the only ones that carried out this investigation, that these enhanced interrogation techniques were used against detainees both inside Guantanamo as well as outside Guantanamo, and that no significant information was obtained as a result of the use of those enhanced interrogation techniques. Now, that is absolutely wrong, and you're going to be able to see from the report itself, as well as from the minority views that we have put together, as well as a response from the Central Intelligence Agency, that information gleaned from these interrogations was in fact used to interrupt and disrupt terrorist plots, including some information that took down bin Laden.
So
now I'll be interested to see if there is any evidence. That's not what the majority report is going to say. And I have never seen good evidence that torture works. You get some good information, but it's always mixed in with bad information. and it's hard to tell the difference between the good and the bad information, because people will basically say whatever they think is going to make the torture stop the soonest, even if it's not true. I made several videos over the years about torture, and about how torture wasn't responsible for getting bin Laden. I didn't have time to put a link down in the video description, but if you're watching this as a recorded show, I should have a link down there to at least one video about torture not working, maybe 2 or 3, and specifically about torture not getting bin Laden. But I want to show one more clip from Saxby Chandless. CBS's Norah O'Donnell confronts him with basically what's been leaked about what's going to be in the report. The Washington posted an article basically saying what I said before, that it's going to show that the torture was more severe and less effective than what we've been led to believe, even what we've been led to believe in the past. But Saxby Chandless denies it, as you'll see over in this clip.
The Washington Post reports that your committee's 6,000-page report accuses the CIA of systematically misleading government officials on the severity of the methods and their effectiveness. A senior official saying, quote, "You come away with the sense that this was pathetically futile." Was torture futile?
What was done here by the White House as well as by the CIA was go to the Department of Justice early in the process, and you have to remember CIA is not geared up to do detention and interrogation, but because of the nature of this war, because of Al-Qaeda being involved, they were given the challenge of putting together a detention and interrogation program. They went to the Department of Justice, said, okay, what can we do? What legally can we do? They were given legal opinions as to what they could do, and in their opinion, they didn't violate that. There will be some allegations of going above and beyond.
But your minority report, you say, will show evidence where some of these enhanced interrogation techniques or torture did yield useful intelligence.
Absolutely, and there, you know, the term torture is being used by the critics of the program. I think that term is going to be disputed both by the folks who were involved.
Torture?
Waterboarding is one of the specific issues that was investigated by the Department of Justice from the standpoint of does it comply with the Geneva Convention, and they made a determination that it is authorized, that it is not torture.
Well, that's because those legal memos were bogus. One of them was from John Yoo, and I'm going to show this very ironic quote from John Yoo when it comes to immigration later. But that whole idea that the torture was justified, and I mean, it is pretty bogus. And President Obama had this press conference this last week where he made this quote, you know, "We tortured folks." And, you know, he said it was wrong, but he also made this argument that we shouldn't be too sanctimonious in hindsight. And the last clip I want to show on torture is from CNN State of the Union with that independent Senator Angus King, who I said caucuses with the Democrats. Candy Crowley confronted him with this clip of President Obama saying, you know, we shouldn't be sanctimonious in hindsight, and we should understand, you know, the pressure they were under. And then she asked this Senator Angus King, you know, so what? What's the big deal about this report if we shouldn't be able to judge people in hindsight? And I think there are more good arguments to answer that question, but I liked his answer, which I'll talk about a little more after I show it to you here.
And here is one of the things he said that caught my attention.
It's important for us not to feel too sanctimonious in retrospect about the tough job that those folks had. And a lot of those folks were working hard under enormous pressure and are real patriots.
So, Senator, it seems to me before this report is released, the question will be sort of, so what? If you have a package of documents that shows that the CIA lied to you all about what it was doing, that it did, in fact, torture people under the definition that most people would see as torture, or your definition of it, what happens to this report other than the, oh, well, now we know?
Well, I hope it goes way beyond that. That's why I voted to declassify it. I think it's an object lesson to future presidents, future intelligence agencies, future Congresses about how things can get off the rails, how things can go awry. And by the way, I wrote my own sort of supplemental views to the report. When they become public, I said something similar to what the president said. These people were under tremendous pressure right after September 11th. They didn't know what the future of the threats were. They thought there were going to be follow-on attacks. And also, the other piece is, we talk about the CIA did this. The CIA is thousands of people. They're really good people. I've met them around the world. They're doing dangerous jobs. They're patriotic. And it bothers me that this whole thing is tarring the whole agency. It was a relatively small number of people.
I got to run. Senator.
So even Senator Angus King there was not completely critical of the CIA. He tried to mitigate it somewhat by saying it was, you know, a few bad apples and they were under a lot of pressure, and I don't know, it's one of the things that really disturbs me about the Bush years is I thought the United States really fell pretty far in a disturbing way when we engaged in that activity. And as to how far it went, I guess we'll find out when this report comes out, redacted somewhat, hopefully this week or sometime soon, and I'm sure I'll be covering it again on Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. But excuse me, speaking of issues that I've covered again and again, I want to play some clips on immigration now. There's been this ongoing issue of the unaccompanied minors that have been showing up at our borders from Central America because of the violence there and because of this 2008 law that says that unaccompanied minors coming from non-contiguous countries can't be immediately deported, like to Canada and Mexico, especially Mexico, I guess, but they get some due process rights, and there's been a lot of wrangling in Congress. And before I get into some of the specific clips, I want to start with this report from Jim Avila on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I think he's done a lot of good reporting on the immigration issue, and I'll start showing you that report and then get to some clips from the newsmakers and politicians. But here's reporter Jim Avila on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
The latest.
It's official. Congress has left the building, leaving the president promising to go solo on the humanitarian crisis at the border and broader immigration reform.
I'm going to have to act alone because we don't have enough resources. We've already been very clear. We run out of money.
Congress on vacation after a last-minute flurry of finger-pointing.
The crisis on the border is one of the president's own making.
In the end, nothing on immigration went from the Hill to the president for signing.
The House stands adjourned.
And 1,500 miles to the southwest along the Rio Grande, there is no vacation. The rafts keep crossing, as we saw from a Border Patrol boat this week.
As a matter of fact, there's a group right there. There's a group coming across. You see it, Sam?
The Obama administration has surged 200 more agents to this area, adding more boats. And it's working, say the people on the ground and water. Unaccompanied minor crossings are down by half in July. What do you see?
The numbers have gone down recently.
Is it because the message is getting across?
I wouldn't know about the message getting across, sir. All I can say is that I think what's been doing is that the more patrols that are out here, the more the local agencies have been helping out.
The refugees keep coming. Many moms and their children, often kids by themselves. This 17-year-old girl came, she says, because of the gangs at home.
The violence over there doesn't allow us to go to school. That's why we're coming over here.
This type of effort on the border is expensive, and so are the new facilities being built to humanely hold the moms and kids while they await asylum hearings. The Border Patrol and ICE say they will run out of money by the time Congress comes back 36 days from now. That's enough time for another 5,700 children to cross the Rio Grande River alone. For This Week, Jim Avila, ABC.
So that Jim Avila report for ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, I think it did a good job of reporting on the congressional inaction and also giving sort of the human side there with being right on the border and showing some of the actual refugee children and their stories. So I wanted to show that to begin with, and now I actually want to show one of the saddest parts of this whole immigration flare-up issue is that it's given more airtime to Texas Governor Rick Perry, who's trying to turn it into some kind of renewed presidential bid, I guess. And I'm going to show this long exchange between Texas Governor Rick Perry and CNN's Candy Crowley from this morning's State of the Union, where she asked him, about the issue, and he has this like rehearsed talking point about how all these people coming across the border are actually criminals, and that's the real danger to Americans that he's fighting to stop, even though there's a lot of evidence that immigrants, and especially undocumented immigrants, commit crimes at a much lower rate than the general population because they don't want to have contact with law enforcement. But Rick Perry doesn't seem to know anything about that, as you can see over in this clip.
Accompanied minors that are crossing the Rio Grande largely to come into the United States. The president has said, because Congress has not dealt with the immigration issue at all, that he feels he has to do this on his own. What we are led to believe by reports is that the president may, in fact, make some moves that would perhaps cut down on the number of deportations that are taking place now, for which he's been widely criticized by the Latino community, and that he may, in fact, give temporary status to those without documents that are currently in the U.S. What do you think of both those things?
Well, I think that is a side issue. What we are substantially more concerned about in the state of Texas, and I will suggest to you across this country, are the 80% plus of the individuals who don't get talked about enough that are coming into the United States illegally and committing substantial crimes. Since September of 2008, we have seen 203,000 individuals who have illegally come into the United States, into Texas, booked into Texas county jails. And Candy, these individuals are responsible for over 3,000 homicides and almost 8,000 sexual assaults. I wish the president would respect that desire of Texans and the citizens of this country to secure the border. That's the real issue here, and one that all too often gets deflected by the conversation about unaccompanied minor children, which that is a tragedy. The idea that parents are putting their kids, or they're being forced to get on a train or a bus and travel 1,500 to 1,800 miles where they're very exposed to being abused, both physically and otherwise. But the fact, from my perspective as the governor of Texas, it's the reason that we are deploying 1,000 National Guard troops, so that the people of the state of Texas will feel that at least the leadership in the state of Texas is doing something to try to make their communities safer. And that is Governor, my goal. I intend to continue to be focused on that as we go forward.
Governor, I have to point out that a number of fact checkers have said that 3,000 homicide figure is wildly off. But let me talk about the National Guard that you want to send. And this is the state sending the National Guard. As I understand it, it's going to cost you $12, $13 million a month. How long are you prepared to spend Texas money to keep the Guard at the border?
We'll continue to do what we have to do to keep our citizens safe. And let me go back to those numbers. What are the number of, I do stand by them, by the way, but what are the number of homicides that are acceptable to those individuals? How many sexual assaults do we have to have before the President of the United States in Washington, D.C. acts to keep our citizens safe? That border is not secure, and we see it every day, not just in Texas, but I will suggest to you the other 47 contiguous states of individuals who are committing crimes against our citizens. It's time for us to secure that border.
So,
you see how Rick Perry spent all that time memorizing those numbers? I think he may have spent time memorizing the fact that there are 47 contiguous states to Texas. I don't know. You can let me know what you think in the comments, but that whole trope there, or his whole talking point or set of talking points demonizing immigrants, and he got in trouble in the Republican primaries when he tried to run for president last time because he endorsed tuition for undocumented immigrants, for in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants in Texas, and he said that those people, the people who don't have compassion for undocumented immigrants, don't have, or have some problem with not having a heart, or I don't remember the exact quote from him in the Republican primaries, but that was one of the things that really got him. So I guess he's gone way overboard on they're criminals, they're rapists, I hate them, and it's kind of sad. I also want to show a few clips from Fox News Sunday where they covered the immigration issue because they had Senator Marco Rubio. In honor of Senator Marco Rubio, I'll do a quick little Marco Rubio there. Chris Wallace had him on, and actually I thought asked him some fairly tough questions. The first question that Chris Wallace asked Marco Rubio, he basically showed him this quote from the Wall Street Journal, which is also owned by the same company that owns Fox News, and that basically said that the Republicans have shot themselves in the foot on immigration, that they've cast themselves as the party that wants to try to deport the most children, and got Senator Marco Rubio, Republican senator from Florida, got his reaction to that Wall Street Journal quote over in this clip.
Passed two measures on Friday, one to make it easier to deport those unaccompanied minors on the border, the other to block the president from deferring any more deportations. The conservative editorial page of the Wall Street Journal criticized what it called deportation Republicans. The GOP again gave the country the impression that its highest policy priority is to deport as many children as rapidly as possible back from wherever they came. Is that the message that Republicans need to be sending Hispanic voters, sir?
Well, I don't think that's an accurate assessment of what's happened here. We have a very serious situation on the border, an unsustainable situation on the border that cannot continue. The only way to address that is to address the root causes of what's happening. And the root causes are a combination, of course, of violence and instability and poverty in Central America. But it's also, according to the president of Honduras, ambiguities in our laws. And those ambiguities began in 2008 with a very well-intentioned law to prevent human trafficking and address it. And then it continued in 2012 with the president's Deferred Action Program. And the combination of those two things has allowed trafficking groups to go into these communities in Central America and tell people that America has some special law that's going to allow them to come here and stay. And that's serving as a lure that's driving this crisis.
Now, I don't know if I buy what Senator Marco Rubio said there about blaming President Obama's deferred action, the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, where the so-called Dreamers got work permits. If you got here before 2007 and you were brought here as a child, you know, through no fault of your own, and you like go to college or join the military, and you don't have a criminal record and meet all sorts of conditions, then you can get a work permit and a promise that you're not going to be deported. That's the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. And the thing is, Marco Rubio had his own bill that was very similar, and it also, you had to get here before 2007, so if people actually know what President Obama did, it shouldn't be a lure. I mean, it's really more misinformation that's the lure, along with the awful conditions in Honduras and the violence in Central America that I think I'm going to show a clip about that a little later, but I want to show Chris Wallace actually being a little tough on Senator Marco Rubio, and I think it may be because, you know, a couple weeks back I showed this clip of Valerie Jarrett talking about how she met with Rupert Murdoch because they both have this belief that immigration is a problem that has to be solved, and that may be why Fox News Sunday is being a little bit tough on Republicans on this immigration issue. Or you can let me know what you think about it in the comment section. But here's Chris Wallace confronting Senator Marco Rubio with the Republican post-mortem after Mitt Romney lost in 2012 about how they decided they really need to pass comprehensive immigration reform or they're never going to get the Latino vote in the United States. And here's Marco Rubio's response to that question from Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday this morning in this clip.
But Senator, after Mitt Romney lost the Hispanic vote to Barack Obama in 2012 by 44 points, the RNC, the Republican National Committee, issued this postmortem. We must embrace and champion comprehensive immigration reform. If we do not, our party's appeal will continue to shrink to its core constituencies only. In fact, hasn't your party done exactly the opposite these last 2 years? Haven't you further alienated Hispanic voters?
Well, I continue to believe we have to reform our immigration laws. I think that's good for the country. I wouldn't say that because of politics. But this issue is related but separate from that. This issue involves a mass migration on the border, happens to be many unaccompanied minor and children. And what we need to do is three things. Number one is we have to treat them the way Americans always treat people, in the most compassionate way possible. Number two, these children eventually will have to return, most of them anyways, to their country. Because at the end, otherwise you are encouraging more people to undertake that very dangerous journey. And the third thing is you have to address these ambiguities in our law that are creating the circumstances that are allowing these trafficking groups to convince people to pay them $8,000 or $10,000 to bring them here.
And I want to show one more quick, well, not that quick, clip of Chris Wallace questioning Senator Marco Rubio. This is questioning him about his flip-flop on the immigration issue, because, you know, Marco Rubio was one of the senators who actually sponsored the bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that had all this extra money for border enforcement, and then also had this long, circuitous 12 or 15-year process that people actually would have a path to citizenship if they paid all these fines and did all this stuff and waited like 12 or more years. And anyway, then eventually Senator Marco Rubio, because, well, I don't know, you can decide for yourself whether it's because he lost popularity with the Republican base, he came out against his own bill, sort of, and Chris Wallace asked him about that, citing his poll numbers specifically. And you can see how Senator Marco Rubio responded to that over in this clip.
But Senator, some people say that you're taking a step back, and they point out the fact that you were one of the leaders for comprehensive immigration reform, for pushing it through the Senate last year, in which you, yes, you dealt with border enforcement, but also at the same time you put in place a plan, an eventual, over the course of 12 or 15 years, path to citizenship. And there's no question that after that, you took a hit in the polls, and I want to put some up. In April of last year, before the comprehensive plan, you led possible Republican contenders for president at 19%. Last October, you dropped to 12%, and now, a poll out just the last couple of weeks, you're down at 6%. Is that why you have now switched and said we have to do this in stages, with enforcement first and any dealing with legality or citizenship for the immigrants way down the line and afterwards?
Yeah, when I got involved in the issue, I knew how difficult it was politically, but I ran for office to make a difference. And this is an issue that not only did I believe I could be a part of making a difference in, I believe it's one the country needs to confront and solve for the good of America. I don't know what it means politically for me or anybody else, but that's not my job. I didn't get elected to maintain good poll numbers nationally. I got elected to address and solve problems. As far as what to do about immigration,
but sir, then why have you?
I'm not talking about changing what we need to do about it.
If it's not political, why have you flipped? Chris, if I may, sir, if it's not political, why have you flipped?
That's not accurate, Chris.
But you're now saying it has to be done in stages before you wanted a comprehensive plan.
Well, we're not, but I think we're talking about two separate things. No, we're talking about two separate things. We're not talking about what to do. I've just outlined to you what to do. We have to do those three things: security, reform of modernizing the legal system, and then address the people that are here. So we're not debating what to do. We're debating how to do it. And I'm just telling you, we will never have the votes necessary to pass in one bill all of those things. It just won't happen. So our choices are, we can either continue to beat our head against a wall and try a process for which we'll never have the support, or we can try another way that perhaps we can make progress on. So what I'm just talking about here is trying to figure out a different way of doing it where we can actually achieve it. But it's got to be a process that has a chance to pass.
Senator.
So that's Senator Marco Rubio responding to another fairly confrontational question from Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace. And I wanted to show all those confrontational questions because sometimes I am a little, often I'm critical of Fox News for asking these very softball questions of Republicans. And at least on the immigration issue, they seem to have a little bit of a spine getting in there and asking some more tough questions. The last few clips I want to show on the immigration issue are on the news. I talked about this a little last week on the show, that President Obama may respond to congressional inaction by taking some executive action that would give the deferred action status to more people. You know, I talked about how these people who came before 2007 and were under the age of 16, brought by their parents through no fault of their own, and didn't have a criminal record. You know, the so-called dreamers. That's about 500,000 people who he gave this deferred action status to by executive action. Well, now he may give deferred action status to up to 5 million people. You know, the parents of those dreamers and some other people who have similar status. So it could be, you know, almost half of the 11 or 12 million estimated undocumented immigrants in the United States would have this deferred action status. So that possibility exists. And first I want to show a clip from Dan Pfeiffer, that senior advisor to the president, was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And George Stephanopoulos asked him if it was actually a violation of the law for the president to give this deferred action status to so many millions of undocumented immigrants. And here's Dan Pfeiffer's response over in this clip.
Providing, even if he hasn't made a final decision yet, providing effectively no deportation for up to 4 or 5 million immigrants. How do you respond to the arguments of those like John Yoo, who said this: if President Obama can refuse to enforce an entire class of laws, such as the immigration law, against millions because he dislikes the policy, why can't the next president unilaterally lower tax rates by refusing to prosecute anyone who only pays a 20% income tax when Congress requires 33%? What's the limiting principle here?
The limiting principle is the law, and the president specifically asked what he can do under the law. Now, in 2012, he took a step to protect a class of individuals, the dreamers, young immigrants who came here through no fault of their own, and that was done within the confines of the law. Now, the Republicans last week took a vote to deport all of those people back to countries that most of them don't know or remember. And that, I think, speaks to the challenge the president has, is we need to address the situation both on the border and broader immigration system. So he's going to do what he can, but under the confines of the law.
And it'll be in September?
It'll be at the end of the summer.
Finally.
And I actually agree with what Dan Pfeiffer said there. As a lawyer, I believe that there is a lot of discretion that the executive branch has, especially written right into immigration law. There's a lot of discretion. And I want to show another clip on that issue, also from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where they had Congressman Joaquin Castro from Texas, a Democratic congressman, and he responded to the same argument about whether President Obama had legal authority to grant deferred action to so many people, because he's one of the Democrats who's been advocating for the president to take that action. And you heard Dan Pfeiffer say there that they may actually do it by the end of the summer, maybe September, end of the summer. Anyway, here's a Democratic congressperson defending that action over in this clip.
Seems to be prepared to go forward on these executive orders to expand the number of undocumented immigrants who will not be deported. And you know, we heard Dan Pfeiffer say the president hasn't made a decision, but it is true that you and others are pushing the president to expand this as far as possible. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, the fact is, George, somebody's got to be working in Washington, and the president is ready to act on immigration reform. The Congress has now had several years, but especially the last two, to do something, and Republicans have failed to move on it. So he will do everything within his power and within the law.
But that's the question. Is it really within his power to expand this by 4 or 5 million immigrants?
Well, absolutely. Remember, the way that he expanded, or that he introduced DACA was deferred action on the students and others by not prosecuting them. And he can do the same thing for other folks as well.
Look, I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree that the president has a lot of prosecutorial discretion, especially in the area of immigration, because it's written into the laws that Congress has passed. Not the law the House of Representatives passed this last week, but that will never become law. And then the final clip I want to show on this whole immigration issue, also on whether the president has the authority to grant deferred action to millions of people, which he may or may not do. Some people say it's actually this ploy to get Republicans to talk about impeachment, and at least in regards to Republican Congressman Steve King over on Fox News Sunday this morning. That ploy worked because he was definitely baited into saying he would at least consider impeachment if the president went ahead and gave deferred action to so many millions of undocumented immigrants. And I'll talk about that final immigration clip after I show it to you here.
White House officials now say, and they really have been teeing this up, that now it looks like the president will take some major executive action over the course of the summer or right after Labor Day, and may even consider deferring the deportations of millions of more illegal immigrants. Congressman King, if he does that, if he goes ahead and unilaterally decides to defer deportations of millions of immigrants, what are you going to do about it?
Well, none of us want to do the thing that's left for us as an alternative. But if the president has decided that he's simply not going to enforce any immigration law, or at least not against anybody except the felons, which essentially he has done already, this is a broader group of people. I think Congress has to sit down and have a serious look at the rest of this Constitution, and that includes that I word that we don't want to say. And I only say that now on this program because I want to encourage the president, please don't put America into a constitutional crisis. Please don't do that. There's too much at stake in this country to be deciding that you can take over the Constitution and write it at will.
But you're saying that if he were to do that, then impeachment would be on the table.
I think then we have to sit down and take a look at that. Where would we draw the line otherwise? If that's not enough to bring that about, then I don't know what would be. We've never seen anything in this country like a president that says, I'm going to make up all immigration law that I choose, and I'm going to drive this thing regardless of the resistance of Congress. That's why I push so hard to get the DACA language out into this legislation that we just passed. It says, Mr. President, you can't do this. It's unconstitutional, and you know it. We want to stop the funding off to implement or enforce DACA. That's the message on...
We got no...
So yeah, Fox News Sunday again got a Republican to talk about impeachment, which I've seen a lot of stories on Fox News this week saying that it's the Democrats who are really talking about impeachment because it's a good fundraiser for them. But the weak version of impeachment is this Republican lawsuit against the president, and I didn't want to show a lot of clips on that, but I want to show this back and forth. First, this is also from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace confronts the Democrat who they have on, Hakeem Jeffries, a Democratic congressperson, with some text of the Constitution, and Hakeem Jeffries gives him this really good constitutional law answer about how the Supreme Court has interpreted the legislative powers to give a lot of deference to the executive to enforce and administer and implement the laws. And as a lawyer myself, what he says is completely true. And then there's this weak response from Steve King, who I just showed there, talking about the lawsuit against the president, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show you that clip here.
The president says that he's just doing his job when he helps people, but let's take a look at what the Constitution says. Article 1, Section 1 says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Article 2, Section 3 says the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Congressman Jeffries, if you read the Constitution, there's no blank check there that the president can help people the way he wants to.
Well, there's no blank check, but that's not what the president has done. This lawsuit is clearly baseless in law or in fact. Under the Take Care Clause of Article 2 of the Constitution, as interpreted consistently by Supreme Court justices, including Chief Justice Rehnquist, the president has the clear discretion to administer, implement, and enforce the law. And as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, that's clearly what he has done. He has not amended the law. He has not abolished the law. What he has done is delay implementation of the employer mandate in stages, consistent with what other presidents have done throughout history, including most recently President George W. Bush, when he delayed penalties connected to Medicare Part D and delayed the enrollment period in 2006, and then turned around with respect to the Small Business Work Opportunity Act of 2007.
All right, let me bring in Congressman King. Your response to that?
Well, the president didn't just simply do a little touch to this from an administrative standpoint. He simply went in and changed the required implementation date that was written by Democrats, passed by Democrats, and signed by our president. And he does not get to make up law out of thin air. He doesn't get to amend it. The Constitution is very clear. Take care that the laws are faithfully executed. And if Hakeem really thought that this was right, then why wouldn't the president accept Congress's offer to fix this law and delay the employer mandate? I don't know any reason for that, for the president to simply give the back of the hand to Congress. And he stood before Congress at the State of the Union address, and he said, I will enact laws. He said, I'm going to do it with my ink pen. His cell phone and ink pen quote compressed into his State of the Union address, and Democrats led a standing ovation to cheer the president for taking away Article I authority in the United States Constitution.
All right.
Well, I think Representative Hakeem Jeffries there had a lot better argument than Representative Steve King. You can let me know what you think down in the comments. I think the Republican lawsuit against the president is frivolous, as I discussed a few weeks back on my LiberalViewer live Sunday clip roundup show. But having shown this like big fight between the Republicans and the Democrats, possibly even this lawsuit that may even go to impeachment, although that seems even too stupid for the Republicans. I want to show this discussion between Bill Maher and independent candidate Ralph Nader, former independent candidate for President Ralph Nader, about whether Republicans and Democrats are really too much the same. And Bill Maher first asked Ralph Nader, said that he was right about that, and then later sort of argued with him about whether it was completely true. But first, here's Bill Maher agreeing with Ralph Nader that the premise of, I guess Ralph Nader has a new book out, and his premise is that there are 25 things that Republicans and Democrats won't do that 70% of Americans want them to do because big corporations are against it. And anyway, here's Ralph Nader's explanation in response to Bill Maher's question in this clip.
Wrong guy. But your point was the Democrats and the Republicans are too alike. And you're saying in this book, which there's a lot of truth to that. You're saying it's corporations the ones who pit the left and the right against each other, and therefore they're the winners, right?
Yeah, it's divide and rule. The old tactic, thousands of years old. They try to get red state, blue state, liberal, conservative, right, left. And they do disagree on a lot of things, like reproductive rights, school prayer, balanced budget amendment, things like that. But in this book, I show 25 areas where left, right, that means a large majority of the American people agree. And a lot of these issues are off the table, the Republican and the Democrat. They don't want to talk about it, whether they're running for election or not, like cracking down on corporate crime, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, restoring the minimum wage, at least to $11, $12 an hour, which is what it would have been if it was adjusted for inflation. And so, well, I don't know any conservative that likes a pay or die healthcare system. Hey, it's $1,000 a pill per day, pay or die, even though the pill may have been developed based on taxpayer-funded research at the National Institutes of Health. So,
I mean...
So yeah, there's Bill Maher pretty much agreeing with Ralph Nader that Republicans and Democrats are too much alike. And then here's a clip of Bill Maher trying to disagree to some extent with Ralph Nader, and Ralph Nader giving a pretty good argument that on some very important issues, Democrats and Republicans are too much alike over in this clip.
It is also true that if you look at an alternative universe where Obama didn't win the last two elections, and there was this guy named Mitt McCain,
who never saw a war he didn't like,
and right, let's merge them. A 200-year-old Mormon who believes he's going to inherit his own planet with Lindsey Graham when he dies. The alternative universe is very different. I mean, first of all, Ted Nugent would be on the Supreme Court. We'd be having wars in 9 different countries. The auto industry would have been allowed to die. Tax rates for the rich would be at 3%. I mean, you can't deny that there also is a difference.
Yeah, the problem is that the Democrats are unable to defeat the worst Republican Party in history. And so they are, in effect, responsible. Like, why couldn't they defeat George W. Bush in 2004? That would have given him 2 Supreme Court. right?
Right.
And look, they are a similar, Republican, Democrat. Look what they're similar of, Bill. Foreign and military policy.
Oh, yeah.
Wall Street bailout and the corruption of big money in politics. They're both dialing for the same
interesting
dollars.
you mentioned.
So that I thought was an interesting exchange, because there are ways where Republicans and Democrats are too similar, and then there are ways where they are importantly different. And Ralph Nader may have a point there that the places where they're too similar is where they're both getting corporate money to be similar on important issues to corporations that don't really jibe with what majority of the American people may want. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. It's sort of not a breaking news story, but I thought it was an important story. And then I want to show you one final clip, since I'm doing this whole thing on the internet and I deal with internet comments all the time. I want to show one more clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. He had on Chris Hardwick, who he described as the king of social media, and asked him about social media and got him to explain why he thinks social media actually is kind of depersonalizing. And you can let me know what you think about that after I show you that final clip for the show tonight over here.
Even though you are Mr. Social Media, I've heard you. I hear you. You have misgivings about what it does to our humanity.
Well, I do think that there's a certain margin of I don't know, empathy that's being lost, because essentially when you look at the way people interface with the internet, when you're interfacing with a computer, you're interfacing with a machine, you're interfacing with text, you're not connecting with another human being the way that we were evolved to look into each other's eyes. So there's a little bit of depersonalization just in the way that we interface with other people on the internet. Then beyond that, most people post anonymously, and so when you're posting anonymously, you don't have to bear any emotional responsibility for your actions. And the third thing is, a lot of social media is essentially a snapshot of whatever an emotion was in a moment. So someone might, if they're watching the show, they might, hey, Chris Hardwick, you suck a huge box of dicks. And I'm like, why'd you say that? And they'll go, oh, I don't know, I don't even feel that way anymore. But it's an emotional snapshot.
I think that is kind of true, all those things that Chris Hardwick said. I'm not actually a big Chris Hardwick fan. I watch Walking Dead, but not Talking Dead, and his new show at midnight I've never really watched. But what he said there I kind of agree with, and you can let me know what you think. I think that is kind of true, that social media has those depersonalizing aspects, but it also has a good socializing aspect. And I appreciate, I have almost 100 people who showed up by the end of the show here to watch live, and I've been reading your comments along the way. Unfortunately, the show has gone over an hour and a half, or around an hour and a half. I think it's about an hour and a half at this point, and I'm expecting people coming home with dinner items at any moment, and I don't want to be interrupted. But let me see. I really enjoyed your comments, and especially the feedback about the volume of my microphone, and I've been reading it along the way, and like I say, it kind of keeps me company while I'm showing you the clips. But I think I'm going to finish up the show. I did want to let you know I've talked about making an edited, produced video. I think it's been over a month since I've made one. I have one that is partially done and should be almost definitely done this week, called Fox News Attacks Atheists for Fighting Tax-Exempt Church Political Activity or Electioneering. I haven't decided the exact title, but it's about the Freedom from Religion Foundation going after the IRS for not enforcing the laws that say tax-exempt churches shouldn't engage in certain kinds of political activity, especially endorsing candidates. And Fox News covered that really badly, and so I wanted to make a video about it and explain the issue. So hopefully that'll be done by like Thursday or Friday of this week, so look for that. I appreciate all of you who showed up, like I said, and kept me company while I showed you the clips, and I'll be reading all your comments and also all the comments that people leave as a recorded show. I hope you enjoyed the time I spent picking out the 33 or 34 clips I showed you, and it ended your weekend a little bit more informed, or informed about what the U.S. corporate media thinks is important anyway. And for my viewers around the world, I hope I started your week with a little bit more information about the U.S. media, and I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.